All right, so today's lecture will be given by Mr. Peter Norman Vangsbo, and he's the Executive Director at the Innovation Center Denmark at Embassy of Denmark in Korea. So he's an Executive Director, and he also is part of the Global Green Growth Institute, GGGI, yes. And also focus areas in the Innovation Center Denmark are green growth, health tech, artificial intelligence, mobility technology, and data-driven innovation. So he'll be giving us a lecture on the future of forest, and these are the contents on the screen. So if Mr. Ringsbo is ready now, then I will move the slide.
I am. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody, from wherever you are. My name is, as mentioned, Peter Vangsbo, and I'm the director of the Danish Innovation Center. It's a Sunday, and I'm sitting in my Sunday shirt here. I also acknowledge that you are spending your Sunday with my lecture, so I'm very honored that you are investing time to hear about deforestation and how we look in the crystal ball for perhaps the future of forestry. I hope this lecture will be open and dynamic presentation. So please write in the comment field if you have any questions, if you have any facts you need to share, then please share it with everybody. And as you can hear, I have this funny accent, and perhaps not everybody understand this Danish accent. But I have been living here in Korea for the last 3 years as part of our innovation center. Next slide. And next slide. So our presentation today, it will be approximately 45 to 50 minutes, and I will just give you a little bit of background about what is the Innovation Center, why have the Danish government established these type of Innovation Center, and then I will give you a little bit of a fly-in of how climate change and forestry are very important links, and how does it actually impact our society today. And then, as you could hear in the presentation, the Innovation Center are working with a lot of different type of technologies, data, entrepreneurship. So I will give you a few ideas from around the world on how I see relevant technologies are dealing with deforestation. And lastly, I would like to share some levers to shape a positive future of forest, which we can put in place worldwide. And throughout the discussion, as mentioned, I hope we can have an open and frank discussion. I need to say I'm really not a key forestry expert. I've been working on peace forestry in Global Green Growth Institute. But also here at the center, we are working on a few different related forestry projects. But I will come back to that. Next slide. And next slide. So these innovation center, which I'm a director of, are scattered around the world in 7 tech hotspots. All from Silicon Valley, the tech capital of the US, to the medical capital in Boston, to Munich, Tel Aviv, Bangalore, Shanghai, and of course here in Seoul. And especially in Seoul, we have a view on new emerging technologies. That is all the way from metaverse, or how Seoul Metropolitan Government are planning to adopt urban air mobility in 2025, to how we can use the resources better of Korea. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit of fly-in of why this is important. The Innovation Center are really working in these type of public-private partnerships. And the whole purpose of our presence here at the embassy is trying to link science and innovation into diplomacy. We definitely see that we can open up doors with more science-based targets. We definitely see that we can connect better to commercial entities of bringing in the best minds and souls from around the world. So our mission is to try to see innovation as a frontline position and how we can create innovation arenas together for testing new technologies. So really the mission of our operation is to try to test and validate and to turn new ideas into sustainable solutions that we can test in geographies and then scale out to the globe. Next slide. What we try to do, and I think this is important for also my presentation here today around forestry, is that we are working in this triple helix format, where we are trying to include both knowledge and know-how from academia. We are working in partnerships with industries, and we are doing all this to make influence to governments. So it's a kind of a circled partnership we are trying to foster. And when we are dealing with complicated aspects like the future of forestry, then we cannot just be single looking into academia or waiting for industry to act or wait for our politician to see the problem around the world. We need to work in a global sense, and we need to work in this kind of triple helix partnerships. This is really rooted in the DNA of the Danish government to work with these type of technology partnerships. And I think also when we are looking into forestry, that triple helix partnerships is the only way forward to work for. So have that in the back of your mind when we're doing when we're going through the presentation, and also for your further studies, trying to look across disciplines, trying to see the different perspectives and challenges from government, industry, and academia in all what you are doing. Next slide. What we try to do is create international cross-sectional and cross-organizational partnership. We're trying to coach our Danish researchers on the context which are present here in Korea, the culture, the business environment. So we are kind of boots on the ground. And of course, we are looking at a Korean-Danish partnerships. But what is most important is that we are looking globally. So all aspects about how innovation, entrepreneurship are happening in South America, in Africa, in South Asia, that is also really important. And some of the work that the Danish government and the Korean government are doing are these global initiatives. The Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs are working very closely with organizations like the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs and organizations like Carbon Neutrality Committee is our trusted partner in creating these global partnerships. Together, we have been engaged in a program you might know as a Partnership for Growth, P4G. It was first held in Denmark, then traveled to Korea, and next time it will travel to Colombia. These type of global partnerships are really valuable for our proposition at ICDK. and is a way for us to inspire and to create impactful investments into new emerging technologies. And only together we can make this happen. So this is a really honor for me to speak to this global group of stakeholders today. And I just want to share that we had this global perspective in our work. So we are not just limiting our action between Denmark and Korea. Next slide. So the Innovation Center Denmark are doing many different things, and I just want to highlight a few things which are related to aspects around forestry. In our center, we are a group of 9 people, both Danes as well as Korean, with many different backgrounds. And as I said, we are trying to create different type of partnerships. One of them is a very, very interesting bioeconomy alliance that we have tried to build up between Denmark and Korea. In our bioeconomy alliance, we are of course looking into how can we use bio-based building materials in our cities. We are doing this because we know that concrete is one of the most CO2 intensive industry. 70% of the CO2 emission is actually happening in a city context, and very much around the built environment. If we can reduce CO2 emission from the construction industry by reducing the volumes of cement and other valuable resources into more bio-based material, then we can reduce the city's CO2 contribution. But the bioeconomy is not just happening in cities. It's also where we have rural areas. It's where we have forestry, straw from agriculture, but also bioeconomy product from the marine environment. And speaking about the marine environment, what we have also done here in Korea is creating a seaweed, Danish-Korean seaweed network. Seaweed is a big thing in Korea. Korea, the 3rd largest producer of seaweed. And you should actually be thinking quite creative around seaweed, because that's the ocean of the forest. Or sorry, that's the forest of the ocean. Seaweed are having the same parameters as forestry. They are building up carbons. They are cleaning our oceans. They are giving food, job, and better biodiversity in oceans. So when we are talking about forestry, we actually have both forestry on land, but we also have them in the marine environment. So that's why I included our seaweed network as related to forestry industry. Yes, next slide. So let me just guide you through how we link climate change and trees, because I think that perspective are really, really important to understand how valuable is forestry for our way of living. So if you could take next slide. From the tropical rainforest in New Guinea to the largest forestry of Siberia, trees are definitely a lifeline for the earth. As with seaweed, they clean the air we breathe, they support biodiversity, and of course they protect our soil. And over the last 2 decades, scientists have been fast unraveling the complex link between our forestry and our climate. And recent research are really showing that it's not going the right way. We experience different type of changes in our climate, and our weather phenomena are changing very rapidly from season to season. We see peaks every season, cold peaks and warm peaks, drought and forest fires. And this is definitely caused by unbalance in the way that we are dealing with our scarce resources in the world. So I think research and the whole bio-geo cycle around the world is some of the most crucial research aspects happening at the moment. As our climate continues to warm and forests are the front line of the crisis, we really need to be able to detect how forest is both causing and creating an effect of climate change. At the same time, they are playing a crucial role in driving the climate. It's also very important. Forestry are having a huge effect on our agriculture, our different land use sectors, which are accounting for around a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions. So what I'm trying to say is that forestry are closely linked to all aspects happening with us utilizing resources in our globe. And what is really important to mention is that for the last decade, many researchers have been trying to capture all these changes into two different type of supermodels. Many different models are trying to give best assumptions on how the Earth system model can be predicting our future. And I think this is the way we should be looking at the climate in the future, by using more data and try to model the way that we are using the resources of the world. Next slide. So the forests are one of the most important mechanisms in the world. It's covering close to 1/3 of the total globe. And as mentioned, it play into all different aspects. We definitely have this ongoing global debate about our carbon capture, the use of CO2, and the biomass in the forestry are definitely one of the key sinks to carbon. There are many different methodology to capture how much carbon is captured by forestry, and some of the technologies I will be presenting a little bit later. But forestry in particular have far-reach effects on our climate. Sometimes it's not just happening locally. The effects that we see in Brazil when they are doing forestry fires and destroying massively areas of forest is actually seen as an effect in the Sahel region in Africa. Sometimes it's creating a lot of air pollution, but it's also changing the global cycle of weather phenomena. So many times people are near to a forest, they don't realize the global effect that the tree are having for our ecosystem. Many times they are destroying the forest without planting new trees because they need a way of living. Forestry fires are an old-fashioned way to create a fertile agricultural land, but it will only have a limited effect for a decade or two before the land have been been taking up all the nutrition. So then they are taking new forestry and burn it with bigger consequences. Old land erode, and new forests have not been built. So right now we see a massive decline of the global forestry area, and we need to change that. And this is why this is important to get you on board and try to be thinking together with you, how can we do this a little bit differently? What is really important also with forestry is that they actually have this albedo effect. When the sun is shining on a dark pattern on the ground like the forestry, they don't reflect the sunlight as good as sand or desert. And this is really important. This is actually lowering the greenhouse effect of the globe. So having these stark areas of forestry around our globe is really important for the global climate and the ability to reflect sunlight. This means that in some areas, growing more forest could actually have a warming effect on our climate. While many push for expanding forest cover to tackle climate change, there are also reason to be cautious, because there are complex climate impact of trees, which are not always acknowledged. Underline this importance of the Earth system models, because these type of models are including kind of dynamic ecosystems and different vegetation cover in their climate simulations. So again, the way forward are doing more climate modeling. Next slide. So how resilient are forests to climate change? We see trees in savanna mixed with woodland grasslands ecosystem have evolved to survive or recover from burning. But many of the world forestry do not typically experience fire. And I think we see sometimes fires here in Korea, and the trees are not used to that type of fire. So many of the world's forestry do not typically experience this, and they are very vulnerable to this warmer temperatures, which are leading to small fires. And they can actually have a very large impact on tree health as well as the wildlife. As a recent example, the Amazon fire in 2019, it actually destroyed more than 900,000 hectares. It's almost half the size of Wales, which were lost into flames. And forestry losses may accelerate in the future the temperature rise. And if this continues to happen, we will not be able to meet the Paris Agreement targets. And if temperature rise even further, scientists expect around a third of the carbon locked with rainforest will be released, leading to additional heating. So again, the climate models are showing these predictions, and it's not looking as positive as it should. Next slide. So will planting more trees solve climate changes? We in Global Green Growth Institute, they had a massive revolving fund created to create more trees in both in Brazil as well as in the Sahel region. So they created a project called Sahara Forest Project, where different type of technologies have been tested in areas where there are very few trees today. And with technologies, we can create kind of different type of microclimates, which can create new ecosystems. And once we have these small ecosystems, trees can grow and create a local microclimate for bringing on more diversity, more vegetation, and more green cover. So we can actually see in these type of microclimates, they have been created in Oman, in Jordan, in Cyprus, and also in different area of the Sahel region. This is actually quite interesting to see that technologies can stimulate more trees and changing microclimates in some of the most hostile environment in the world. So I definitely believe that combining technologies with deforestation or with forestry is the way forward. And planting trees is not just the solution to climate, but it's also an important way of creating education, jobs, and improving our decline of biodiversity worldwide. By creating more forestry, I think creating jobs are one of the most important links. Because if people can see that new forestry are creating job opportunity, they can see that they can have a resilient future in their area and not damage the forest. So they will be protecting the new trees which have grown, and hopefully tourism and new technology and fostering of new forest will lead to a much more progressive future for the forestry around the world. So I definitely think that planting trees are solving the climate change, and I think planting tree need to have a lot of technology implementation before it will be successful. Next slide. So there is a lot of associated benefit with forestry. Now I just gave you a very brief fly-in on why trees are important. This is very much locally, but when we're looking at the supply chain of trees, there are many aspects which should be notified. Next slide. So forestry are simply important for the way we live today. Forestry are important for our next generation. We see we are just coming out of a global pandemic. Medicine, different type of future medicines are laying in our forestry ecosystems, both in the trees as well as the biodiversity. If we continue to decline the global biodiversity, if we continue moving ahead on deforestation, we damage the way for us to prevent future pandemics. So I think we are really damaging our way of society if we are neglecting that trees are having our role. Forestry also providing a lot of food around the globe. Agroforestry are widely used in many low income countries. And actually what is really important is that in Sweden, which are not a low income countries, they have actually adopted agroforestry to provide food for cows and for pigs, because they can see that introducing normal domestic animals in the forestry, the domestic animals are creating microhabitats and are actually accelerating new trees to come into the forestry and to increase biodiversity. So right now, many places around Europe, we are introducing a lot of new animals which have not been in our forestry for the last 100 years. Beavers, moose, wolves, all important aspects in our ecosystems are now reintroduced. By having a more complex ecosystem in our forest, we will make it more resilient. We will also make it much more fruitful and provide much more greater supply for different type of food items as well as building items. So I definitely see that politicians around the world have acknowledged that we need to reinstall biodiversity in our forest, and we need to keep a very diverse biodiversities in with trees and vegetation in our forest to foster a whole new ecosystem. So I said forestry influence the global weather, but it's also helping to fight erosion. We see massive mudslides around the world, and many of them are caused by deforestation. In Korea, we see once in a while mudslides, and we see it many places where they have harvest forest. So to prevent erosion, we need to make sure that we are thinking very thoroughly on where we are planting and where we are harvesting our wood. Yeah, next slide. What we have been working around in Denmark a lot is how we see our bioeconomy resources in a more circular way. The whole circular economy aspects are really, really important for our new way of seeing our economic flows. We cannot continue to have this linear view on a take, use, and disposal economy. We need to be thinking much more recyclable in every aspect we are doing in our society, including our forestry management. As I mentioned previously, then of course the cities are a great use of resources, but the cities are also creating food supplies to many citizens, and in the past we have not been so well by distributing the waste into new sectors. And I think with recycling and upcycling of the waste from the cities, we will be able to create a new economy where we are using organic food much more progressive, not just fill it on landfill sites, but creating energy out of our waste. Biogas are definitely a way forward to protect energy supplies, both in cities, but also for our industries. And biogas from wood material are seen in Sweden and Finland, in Canada, and even in Russia. So I think we must continue to innovate and develop our sectors. Still, there are a huge untapped potential in the circular bioeconomy. We have been working on bioeconomy for around 5 to 10 years in Denmark, and we see more industries are creating around bioeconomy. So what is bioeconomy? Next slide. These are just an example of the loop. We have our consumers, which always need production from industries. Like an example here in Korea, then we have one of the biggest chemical companies in the world. It's called LG Chem. They are a massive producer of plastic. And today, plastic are used by the fossil fuel, which cannot continue. Fossil fuel are just being used in the plastic industry and disposed by the community. There are no recycle of fossil-based plastic. But for many years, we have known that plastic can be generated by polymer. And biopolymer are coming from many different type of organic waste streams. In our collaboration with LG Chem, we are trying to foster these type of bioplastic solutions for the future of LG Chem's production. And these are the business models that we need to be looking into. How can we replace some of the fossil energy, fossil resources in industry with bio-based material? How can we use some of the byproduct from the agriculture sector to create biogas or feedstock to industry? One of our most kind of energy consuming industries in the world is our fashion industry. We all are wearing a different type of textile. Many are synthetic. Many are coming from plastic. And actually, right now here in Korea, as I mentioned, we are working a lot with seaweed. Seaweed is a stabilizer which can actually be adapted into the textile production and replace cotton, because cotton is also an industry which are demanding a lot of water. So by thinking circular in all aspects of our society, we will be able to restore our forestry better. We will be able to come closer to a carbon neutral industry, and we will, by having a carbon neutral industry, be able to meet the Paris Agreement. And I think this type of circular thinking is very important. Next slide. So what I had in mind here was to hear a little bit your reflections of why forestry are important for your way of living. So if you have any comments, please share it in the thread, and we can take a few of them. Is there anybody of you which are looking into the consequences of deforestation in your world? I'm not sure if I can see any of the comments. Any views? Let's take the comment on sandstorms. Sandstorms is definitely one of the most risky part on creating new forestry. The whole reduction of nutrient from the soil are creating massively sandstorms both in Asia, in Africa, in the Middle East. Many places, the consequences of the sandstorm can see over many hundred kilometers. Even in Denmark, we can see the consequences of sandstorms. We have something called blood rain. When there are sandstorms in the Sahel, the sand particles are traveled into our weathering systems. And when it rains, it have like a reddish color, which are coming from the sandstorms. And in Iraq, they had a lot of mangroves in the past, and the mangroves are very important for the whole fisherman ecosystem in the southern part of Iraq. But I also believe that the mangrove system have been heavily reduced due to unrest and many other things. Let me continue, then we can perhaps take a few more bullets in the end of the presentation. Next slide. So in the next 5 minutes, I will just give you a brief introduction to different type of technologies dealing with deforestation. Next slide. So as you can see here, we see deforestations around the world, but there are areas around equator which are severely seeing negative consequences. This is mainly happening in Indonesia, in Brazil, but also in Central Africa. Every year we are hearing about forestry fires. And as I said earlier, the forestry fires are not just a local phenomena. They are really changing the weather patterns and are accelerating more fires. And in the last few years, we have seen massive forestry fires in Australia due to increase of heat. But we also see in the green areas, especially in China, that there have been a net gain of forestry. And what I was actually most surprised to see, that there is a net gain of forestry in India, because India is still having a massive growing of the population, and also a lower poor communities, which normally are using a lot of forestry for heating and for cooking. So it's very enlightening to see that India they have break the curve, and now they have a net positive increase of forestry. We still need to see in many places in Europe net increase of forestry. Normally it's kind of status quo, but we also see a growing use of local produced food in Europe, which are declining forestry. Next slide. So what do we do? How can we measure it? There are many different technologies out there dealing with different type of forestry related deforestation aspects. So let me just give you a handful of solutions. Coltivio is a new way to invest in nature. It's a very interesting entrepreneur company. The company encourages investors to unlock investment in natural capital. Natural capital is trying to set a price on our ecosystem, and are opening up a way for investors to put a price on their product. So if you look at your shoes, the natural capital of your shoes, that are often a lot of rubber in your shoe. There are some textiles, there are some leases. All this can actually be priced, and the forestry can actually be using natural capital accounting in a smart and inclusive way to bringing landowners and accredited investors and corporates together. And when they are using remote sensing like satellite data and machine learning, they are improving the land restoration practices in these areas. They are aggregating land product development with different partners to increase the investment ready portfolio, and these portfolio produce certified carbon offset, but it's also reporting on biodiversity conservation, water retention, and all other co-benefits. And I think this value of associated benefit from forestry, this is really important for the investors to know that, so they can have a monitoring value on their investment. So natural capital accounting is really a topic I see as can facilitate greater investment in sustainable forestry practices. Next slide. FarmTrace is another software platform that connect organizations with farmers so they can farm more sustainable and with less environmental impact. And FarmTrace provide regular, verified farm level impact and quality reporting, so organizations have the information that they need to improve their sustainability performance. So many places, here in Korea, coffee is a hot topic. Everybody are drinking coffee after lunch or after dinner, and not many coffee drinkers are actually thinking about their environmental consequences. But Max Havell way of thinking of coffee production is very important for a group of clients. And in order to detect the impact of coffee production, these FarmTrace solutions are really important to track progress on how they farm, how they create environmental benefit, how they are working with deforestation, carbon storage, and improving their CO2 footprint. So take a look at FarmTrace. It's really an interesting software platform which can be used in many different areas. Next slide. This is just a continuation of FarmTrace. It's accessing the carbon market for smart farmers. This can both be for fruits, for coffee, for roots, which are sold all over the world. Next slide. So towards a more sustainable supply chain, also larger companies are looking into producing more sustainable, and Unilevers are having a global sustainability strategy, which are embedded throughout the value chain, and they are connecting all the different actors, and one of the actors are actually using these type of sound. The acoustic monitoring device are capturing a lot of additional biodiversity data, which are used for reporting on their operation performance. And it seems to be a potential for enriching source of baseline data for the agriculture sector to produce valuable input to Unilever. These are seen in the Amazon rainforest. Next slide. And here we have the Unilever approach. that they are using big data to report on different type of supply chains performance. And I think the way forward when we are dealing with sustainable forestry, it will only happen when big players like Unilever, Walmart, and you name it are having these global initiatives. And by using big data to be able to report on the performance, then they are cutting off deforestation. They are increasing the cost of the product, so they will create more valuable jobs for the farmers. And we see that a lot of new technologies are arising when the big companies are making sure that they are capturing the performance of local farmers. And especially in Indonesia, we see that farming methodology have been much more effective, been much more sustainable. Still, there are a lot of issues in Indonesia with forestry fires, but a lot of the companies are having huge ambitions for local community to be able to report on the forestry. And I think Unilever is one of the companies globally which having the biggest impact as such. Next slide. And lastly, we see a huge trend that companies, they want to be CO2 neutral. We have a window manufacturing company called Velux in Denmark. They produce a window which consists of a wooden frame and of course windows. They have set as part of their PR strategy that they will be historical carbon neutral. They would like to be neutral for the last 50 years. And they will do that by planting in partnership with WWF a lot of trees around, especially Brazil, but also Central Africa, and to capture their CO2 in new forestry. So this is why tree tracking technologies are needed, because right now we see a lot of companies working with CO2 reduction strategies, but soon it will also be the individual, and they need to have different type of measures to be able to see how big their investment are creating local impact, and how either the company or the individual can reach carbon neutrality by planting new trees around the world. So this can be a future entrepreneurship platform, I believe, by having new parks, new plantation for larger corporates and individual in the US, in Asia, in Europe, to buy new land and plant trees and biodiversity. So I can see that the time are running out, and I would just like a few minutes to discuss a few things with you on how you can improve your local forestry and how you can be engaged. So is there any of the audience who are member of a deforesting group or working with technology right now? Please write your comments in the thread, or speak up. You're most welcome to take the word.
Hello, Peter.
Hello.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Actually, we in our team, the team number 3, we have our subtopic is about emerging technologies. and we are building an action plan around like reforestation. So it's just a quick question. What do you think about the effectiveness of, for example, big corporations when they do pledges about planting trees? And what do you maybe in your experience see that can be, like how can, for example, these new technologies can help them?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think the last technologies, this this 302, I think local communities they need to report back to the big companies when they are having a new plantage, or when they are planting new trees. They need to see how fast is it growing, but also what is the associated impact? What type of trees will there be grown? And will the trees actually have a co-benefit to the local community? Cashew nut trees are grown in Sri Lanka, and cashew nut is a very valuable fruit for the local community. And if corporate companies are trying to invest only to capture their CO2, then they want to be looking long term on trees which are having a carbon sink potential, like with big trunks and big growth of biomass. But the local community, I think they should see an opportunity for harvesting some of the associated benefits by either harvesting the fruits of the tree, or by utilizing the area for agroforestry. Because as I mentioned in my presentation, then if you are adding more disturbance in forestry, the biodiversity will grow. So by adding domestic animals into forestry, there will be disturbance where it will catalyze further biodiversity and further vegetation. And sorry, directly to your question regarding the technologies, then the report regime are really crucial for the companies. They need to see the impact that they are doing, not only for the trees, but also for the community. Because if the community, the local community, are not happy, then the investment in the trees risk to be deforested. So I think it's kind of a mutual benefit, and technologies can be that report regime.
Thank you so much.
Any other comments?
I actually have a question.
Yes.
So we learned about these different technologies that you shared with us, which was very interesting. So thank you for the presentation. But I was wondering, how could youth use these types of technologies or platforms to help climate change?
How I could use it?
Or how youth, so maybe ages 18 to 30.
I definitely think that there need to be more educational aspects on the importance of forestry. I think we should the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Carbon Neutral Committee, the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we should create a program, forestry educational program for youth around the world, because it's lack of knowledge which are the biggest risk for deforestation, that they don't see the consequences of it. I completely acknowledge that we all need to be hidden by the evenings, we need to have a warm meal, and we need to eat. But if the young generation can see associated benefits within maintaining a sustainable forestry practice, and it can lead to growth, then we can make sure that the young generation will not continue like we have been doing. So I think creating a platform for educational aspects is important. And just as the previous team member was saying, we need to have, I suggest that we need to have a kind of living labs in forest where we can test and play around with different technologies in collaboration with companies like Unilever or Walmart, or organizations like Global Climate Fund or Green Growth Climate Institute. So living lab aspects are facilitating test and validation of new technology in forestry. So if we could create a forestry living lab around the world, these living labs would be able to share knowledge and inspire each other and test new technologies. So that would definitely be one of my suggestions.
Thank you.
We have 2 hands. Team number 6.
I think they're both from team number 6. So
Sorry.
the following is the name.
Hatja.
Hey. Hi there. Yeah, I was wondering if you have any future plans for projects in the Middle East.
I actually have. I've been living a few years and working in the Middle East before coming to Korea, and I was working with a UK-based architect. It's a fantastic project called Sahara Forestry Project. They are using concentrated solar power systems for taking in very salted brine, seawater, and with the energy from the concentrated solar power systems, then they can take out the minerals and the salt and use it for irrigation. And they have created these type of very low cost facilities where they can start to grow vegetations, very small scale. And what we have seen around the facility is actually that because the microclimate are changing, then there will be a growing different type of vegetations around the facility. These have been tested in Oman and in Jordan, and we established one in Doha in Qatar. So that would be something I would really like to work further with, creating small pilots of Sahara Forest Project. You should definitely look it up, the Sahara Forest Project. It's very tangible technologies. The projects in Jordan was supported by NOAA, the Norwegian Aid Development Agency, and the Norwegian Development Agency are supporting forestry a lot. So that could be a mean of finance for project in the Middle East. And I also think, Ajay, you're from Iraq, and I think the Norwegian government are also supporting forestry
The
and
TNA
biodiversity
right now.
project now.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm actually working with a Norwegian company called Carbon Limit. Yeah. Thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much. And there was another from Team 6, Biva, Sido.
We can hear you. Your mic. Something wrong with your mic.
Biva, Sido.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes.
Oh, for a country with war and conflict, how they can solve the problem of deforestation? Because I mean, the question is, they should start from solving the political conflicts, then go to the solve the problem of forestation and deforestation and environmental issues, because or they should do it together. But according to my experience in Iraq, the government mostly is busy with conflict and war. They have no view or attention to the environmental issues. So I think the question is, the government what should do? They should solve the problems, political problems first, and then go to the environmental issues, or no, there is another way also.
Thank you so much, Eva. You're absolutely right. There are so many challenges. One of the projects I would like to mention, however, specific in conflict zone, is a project I was engaged with the Global Green Growth Institute and the Korean Forestry Service. They established a peace forestry project in Ethiopia to actually divide the fighting tribes or communities, and it was a way to maintain a peace in an area. And the conflict, the root of the conflict was actually around food availability and water availability, and providing this forestry peace project actually increased the water body and the food opportunity, and it was protected by a UN sanction. So the poor community were prevented for going in and harvest the small trees, and it's still ongoing, and it's actually creating good benefits. So I think I come from a perspective where I like to see small movements. If we many times when we are engaging with governments, it's often ending up in only discussions and not any progress. So I like to work with technologies and small pilots, trying to test things out, like the Sahara Forest Project. And many times these type of aspects, they're not often creating big impact, but they are creating local impact. And we need to show our local community that we can actually change the things. So small pilots is, in my view, important inspiration platform for many people. And this is why I like these aspects around technologies and how to prevent the deforestation. Because I think preserving this world, we need to be able to report on our progress, and we need to be able to work in these triple helix partnerships, where we are working with industries, local communities, and policymakers. Did that answer your comment?
Thank you so much. Just I am working on the local government in failed states. Just I am trying to connect this topic to the role of local government and how to improve the local government to respond to the deforestation and to protect the environment.
And where is that?
It is Iraq, but Kurdistan region.
Okay.
Some region of Iraq.
Yeah. When I was working living in the Middle East, I saw a lot of the Middle Eastern banks that they would actually like to do community projects, and I have for a very long time tried to be talking around sustainability projects with investment banks or normal banks from the Middle East, that they should be more progressive, working out with the local community, not just providing food or shelter, but actually be working with building up sustainability practices, education, and research. So I know that there are some progressive banks which are supporting that community development of forestry. So take a look at some of the banks from the Middle East. Some of them are willing to support good community projects.
Thank you, sir.
Should we have the last comment, or should we close off here this Sunday afternoon?
Well, right now I think the lecture time is over, but if anyone really wants to ask any more questions, perhaps you can let us know your email.
I think there is one question in the chat box, one last question from Mari.
Can anybody read it up?
Yeah, sure. So my question was about carbon offsets and carbon offsets related to forestry. Like, what do you think about this?
I think that the biomass are capturing a lot of carbon material, both the forestry on land as well as the forestry in the ocean, our seaweed. So we simply need to build up more biomass on land, both because it's a carbon sink, but also because our green vegetated area, especially the forestry, are at a darker land surface. So it had an important albedo effect for sunlight. So I know that it might be controversial, that there are other views if forestry are carbon steady state ecosystem. I believe that that building up carbon material in forestry are really important.
Sorry. My question actually was about carbon offsets as a concept.
Like CO2 emission from
No, like companies working with carbon offsets and paying their damage with carbon offsets and so on. You mentioned something about this before.
Yeah, I think a lot of the global progressive companies, they are having their own climate targets, and of course they're looking into their own operation on how they can reduce energy consumption, how they can reduce the use of resources, but it's not enough. If you're looking at a chemical company like the one I mentioned, LG Chem, they need to do much more beyond what they can do in their own operation. And I think with the amount of money that they earn, they should invest in green projects, especially forestry projects, because they can use it. they can use it, of course, in their branding, but I also think that they have a global responsibility to be acting more sustainable. And I think these massive companies, they are having the financial means to make a few of these pilots possible. And I mentioned this window company called Velux. You should take a look at it. They are creating a massive program with WWF to be historical carbon neutral of the entire operation. So they will grow trees in Central Africa and South America, and it will have a big impact on the local community where they will be planting the trees. So I think hopefully there will be a race who can be more sustainable within these companies, and I hope that there can be like a race towards carbon neutrality, which can lead to more investment in sustainable forestry management practices, greening of deserts. So I hope. I'm not sure I'm convinced that it will happen, but I still hope.
Thank you very much.
It's 20 over my speaking time, and I know it's a Sunday and you have a lot of other things to do. So I would really like to thank you so much for your attention and for your comments, and I really want to salute you all with the important work that you are doing. We really need more guys like you. And what is really important is that you share your knowledge. You are a lighthouse. You have a good thinking, and you should be sharing your good thinking with people around the world. So please be vocal on the project that you are working with, and hopefully these lectures are giving you new inspirations on concrete technologies that you can be looking into. So it was a great pleasure to talk with you all, and I hope you got some insight you could use for your further work. Thank you so much wherever you are in the world, and have a great Sunday.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.